Two guys of Minnesota sports flowing in their veins. Mackie and Judd on SKOR North and SKORNorth.com.
Reckless speculation.
It's not Reckless Speculation Thursday yet, but it is a Scoop Tuesday. That means Judd, that means Declan, that means Darren Doogie Wolfson, Channel 5 Eyewitness News Scoop podcast as well. And in the time that we have together today, Darren, let's get right to it. You told me off mic that you have a Wolves trade rumor / scuttlebutt. So let's talk about it. First time that Dex and I are hearing this. What do you got?
Good afternoon, Judd. Hello, Declan. Judd, thank you for your flexibility. The Vikings maneuvering their schedule all over the place. So thank you. Yes, this will be the first you are hearing this. Now, trade talk across the league picks up mid-December when guys who signed over the summer are now trade eligible. So that kicks in here in a couple days. Next week, G League Showcase in Vegas. All the executives are out there, so the Wolves will have a healthy contingent in person in Vegas next week, just like every other team. So inevitably, dialogue takes place, not over the phone, but face-to-face. So here is the buzz. Okay. The Miami Heat, like a lot of teams, are not real happy with their start through these first 24, 25 games. So Miami is interested in shaking some things up. Kyle Lowry is a name being floated about. Now, Kyle Lowry is under contract not only for the rest of this year, but for next year at nearly $30 million. Kyle Lowry is aging. One could make a case. Kyle Lowry. Now, I loved Kyle Lowry at Villanova. Loved him with Toronto. But at this point in his career, he's aging. Like, I'm not sure I want Kyle Lowry for next year because of the contract. Bulldog, so much to like, but past his prime. That Miami has floated about this idea. Okay, Minnesota, it doesn't look like you want to extend D'Angelo Russell. What about you send us Russell? Here is Kyle Lowry. Now, let me make this very, 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 very clear.
They're going right now.
Because, hey, we appreciate the clicks, right? Like, we like when people are watching on YouTube. We like when people are listening on Spotify, on Apple. That's why we do this, right? But let me make this incredibly bleeping clear. Nothing is remotely close. My understanding is this is not the Wolves suggesting this idea. Most trades talked about never happen. Do I foresee a scenario? Whatever you think of D'Angelo, whatever Tim Connolly thinks of D'Angelo. And I'm telling you, like, I don't think Tim Connolly has ever come remotely close to extending D'Angelo, who, by the way, deserves some love for the way he's played the last handful of games. He has been a lot better the last 6, 7, 8 games, really, since Cat went down than in those first 15 to 20 games. He also was brilliant the first 50 games of last year, then tailed off, then was brilliant in the play-in game against the Clippers, then stunk when Dylan Brooks shut him down in the playoff series against Memphis. But let me make this incredibly clear. Nothing is close. This is not the Wolves shopping D'Angelo Russell. I'm not even quite sure Miami is shopping Kyle Lowry. But a lot of teams, Judd, it speaks to a lot of teams are trying to figure out who they are. It's scuttlebutt, yes. It's scuttlebutt. But my understanding is there was at least some sort of inquiry made. And again, this is not the Wolves initiating any sort of dialogue on this front. But I'm telling you, there are so many teams. If you look at the standings right now, there are so many teams right at 500, maybe a game above, a game below. A lot of teams are not real happy with where they are. And this is about the time the trade deadline is like, what, February 8th, February 9th? It's early February. So this is about the time when trade talk starts to pick up. So Tim Connolly literally wouldn't be doing his job if he doesn't listen.
Yeah.
His biggest trade chips would be the Russell expiring contract. Taurean Prince has an expiring contract. Now, to me, you want Taurean. I want Taurean here. I don't want him elsewhere. So unless you need that money to even out a really good return, like to me, you don't trade Taurean Prince. I guess Naz Reid and Jalen Noel are also expirings, but they make such little money. It's not like you really need their salaries to even out a trade. Now, teams like those guys, right? So you may have to give up one of those guys if you want something pretty good in return. But those would be the Wolves' trade chips. We know that they don't have the draft pick ammunition to complete a pretty good trade, but they still have the ability, if they want to make a trade.
Interesting stuff. So what would be if this conversation between the Heat and Wolves picked up, which you are clearly saying right now it is not, what would be your assessment of that offer and that potential trade?
I mean, if I'm Tim Connolly, I hang up the phone instantly. I mean, I'll roll the dice with D'Angelo, then make some sort of determination after the year. I get it. Like, who's the Wolves point guard next year? Like, it's hard for me to say right now it's D'Angelo Russell, but there could be a sign and trade with D'Angelo in the summer. Like, I'd keep that option on the table before I would welcome back that Kyle Lowry contract for next year. Right. If Kyle Lowry wasn't expiring, you might be able to talk me into the injury concern would be there, though. Like, D'Angelo at least doesn't really break down, right? Lowry up there in age, definite injury concern. Heck, how is he on the 7 or 8 or 9 back-to-backs you have the rest of the regular season as you're fighting, scratching, clawing, trying to stay out of the play-in? Because, like, right now, Judd, if you look at the Wolves' schedule the rest of the year, it is one of the more difficult schedules in the Western Conference. Are the Wolves going to be able to avoid the play-in again, right? Like, are they back in the play-in, right? Or can they avoid the play-in? When I say again, this was a scenario we were, throwing around this time last year. Can they avoid? Is there a scenario where they could avoid the play-in? 46 wins last year, but they were stuck in the play-in, right? 46 wins got them that 7 seed. The 8 seed was the LA Clippers. The Wolves win that game, get the 7 seed, then end up losing in 6 to Memphis. Right now, like, can you avoid being the 7 seed or the 8 seed? Can you get as high as the 6 or the 5 or even higher? I'm not sure, Judd. Like, right now, would you say the Wolves win 46, 47 games? It's hard for me to say that.
I have no idea now, Dukes. I have no idea. There's some nights I see them and I think, okay, it's starting to gel, but Cat's not in. But then, like last night, they're just awful. I have no clue. This team has me thoroughly confused.
Well, and that's what 500 teams pretty much do, right? They are about 500 without Cat, 11-12. Excuse me, with Cat. Without Cat, they are exactly 500, 3-3. So with Cat, 11-12. Without Cat, 3-3. You look at the offensive rating numbers, the defensive rating numbers. Our mutual friend Dane Moore put some stuff out on social media earlier today. The numbers mirror each other. Now, the schedule has been more difficult these 6 games without Cat, right? Opponent matters. But if you look at the 21 games with Cat, the 6 without Cat, the numbers are pretty much identical, right? So the way this thing is trending, I think they get above 41 wins. Like, I don't think they're finishing 41-41, but I think they might be closer to 43, 44, maybe get to 45. But it's hard for me to say, okay, for sure, they will match last year's win total. Maybe. You're right, because there's some Jekyll and Hyde. There are some nights they look brilliant. The Memphis game here.
Yeah.
Like, they would have,
I was there.
The way they played that game, you beat just about anybody, especially in your building.
Yep.
Right? So they have it in them. The game in Indiana. Indiana came into that game red hot. The Wolves played wonderfully. Right? So they have it in them. It's there. I thought the game in Salt Lake City the other night was perhaps their best effort. We can debate whether it was Memphis here or the game at Utah, but I thought the game in Utah on Friday night they were brilliant. So we know they have it in them, but it's hard for me to sit here and tell you right now, based on the body of work we've seen so far, that this roster is going to match last year's win total.
What's the word on a potential return for Cat now? Or is there an updated timetable of when he might be back?
Well, same deal. So they will reevaluate around Christmas. This was always a 4 to 6 to 7-ish week type recovery. So I fully expect him back in January. I've yet to hear of any sort of setback or anything like that. But like, you're not going to see him the rest of this month.
Okay. Vikings news. What can you tell us about your end? Ed Donatel, defensive coordinator, under fire. O'Connell was asked about him yesterday and basically said, I'm not planning any changes right now, which is sort of a cryptic, like you don't have to say right now if you don't plan on changes. Do we think that Ed is on some sort of double secret probation, if not to be fired, then to potentially lose play calling duties if the Vikings don't have a good showing Saturday against the Colts?
Well, I mean, it's certainly on my radar. I mean, in fact, on TV on Sunday night on Channel 5, I said with Mike Pettin in the building, an accomplished defensive coordinator back in the day, it's not like you need to bring in an outsider. Let's have Mike Pettin call the defense on game day. I mean, Mike is involved in some form or fashion anyway, so why not during the course of the game on Sunday, or in this case this week, Saturday, for those 3 hours, why not have Mike Pettin, not Ed Donatel, call the defense? So I suggested that on TV on Sunday night because it's one thing when it's Dak Prescott or Josh Allen. Judd, when it's Mac Jones, when it's Mike White. Now, Jared Goff is actually pretty good, but certainly White and Jones. But now this pattern of 5 consecutive weeks giving up 400-plus yards, like something has to change. But there was never any sense, like, you know, you can look at my Twitter. A lot of people tweeted me on Sunday immediately after the game, Sunday night, Monday morning, saying, hey, any buzz on any sort of change coming? I just said no, right? So I wasn't surprised that O'Connell answered the question Monday afternoon the way he did. But it's certainly on my radar if Saturday goes south.
Yeah, and I don't think, to be clear here, I don't think O'Connell's going to fire Ed. I do think that him being stripped of play calling is possible, and if
I think that would be it.
Quit,
yeah,
that's his decision. But I don't. But I think that there's a certain faction of fans who are like, fire him now. I don't see that happening.
Yeah, and you know, semantics. I mean, I called for his firing, but it wasn't necessarily TV. Everything is so tightly wound, right? I don't have 45 seconds to elaborate when we only have 6 minutes and we're trying to get to 9 different talking points. Yep. But yes, that's pretty much what I meant. That you're not telling him to hit the car, get out of the parking lot, never come back. But yeah, it would be more just stripping his game day duties. But yeah, I did use the term firing, so I guess, you know, semantically we can debate. Okay, I could have used a better word in that case. But yeah, it's certainly it's on my radar, and you know, certainly on my radar, you know, for January, February, beyond, you know, maybe not immediately beyond, but you know, January, February is who is the defensive coordinator next year, right? Because this is trending in that direction, that Ed Donatel will not have the title next year of defensive coordinator.
Absolutely. Who do we expect to return against the Colts, starting with Christian Darrisaw? Yeah,
well, him. You know, I tweeted on Sunday, you know, the 3 guys that missed the game in Detroit, Darrisaw, Bradbury, Harrison Smith, that I fully expected all 3 to be back Saturday against the Colts. So yeah, it's trending that direction. The thing on Darrisaw is he really just hasn't had much time the last month for conditioning. Like, he cleared the protocol, so medically he was okay to play on Sunday.
Yeah.
But it's a different animal, like from a conditioning standpoint. Are you physically okay? The brain is clear enough. You know, the doctor has cleared you. You can play, but can you really hold up playing 71 snaps or whatever it was? Yes. Right? And just from a physical standpoint, because he hasn't done much for the last month, he just wasn't in that spot. But walk through today, practice Wednesday, practice Thursday, walk through on Friday, you know, getting enough work in all week in the weight room. Like, he'll be ready to rock and roll, you know, barring some sort of setback, but he'll be ready to rock and roll on Saturday.
And Blake Brandel, who replaced Darisaw, torn MCL out for the season. Is that correct? Or at least the next 4 games? Although
yeah, they'll make the IR move.
Out.
Okay. Correct. Yeah. Right. And so, now could Udo, I guess, if need be the starting left tackle on Saturday? I suppose he's the one who came in for Blake, but I fully expect to see Darisaw back out there on Saturday.
Tell me about the Twins. They made a move. Now it's not Carlos Correa yet, but a 3-year, if I'm not mistaken, $10 million contract for former Astros and Red Sox catcher Christian Vasquez, which does fill a glaring need. I take it that if there is a depth chart for catcher, it's now Vasquez Jeffers. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I mean, when you're paying Christian $10 million a year, yes. He is 1A with Jeffers underneath. Now, it's not going to be a 90-10 type of split, but it's also not going to be 50-50. It's just not. Now, is it 60-40, 65-35? That'll play itself out, but you're not paying him $10 million a year for a 50-50 type split. My sense is he doesn't sign here. If he was told, okay, this is going to be a 50-50 platoon with Ryan Jeffers. I hear good guy. My Boston people say good dude. Well, you'll like him. The clubhouse is going to like him. There are no character concerns with him. I am told, Judd, the initial offer by the Twins was below $330. It was 3 and something, but it wasn't $330. That's what took so long, because the Twins initially made an offer 5-6 days ago, right? And so if that offer was good to go, he would have accepted the offer then. So my understanding is the Twins then went up. At one point, he was maybe seeking out a 4-year deal. I don't think anybody was comfortable offering him in his 32, 33 age. I don't know if you wanted to be paying Christian Vasquez good money his age 36 season, but teams were comfortable paying him for his ages 33, 34, 35 seasons. But the Twins had to go a little bit higher to secure his services. But he was their number one target. Sure, they had dialogue with the Oakland A's about Sean Murphy. Maybe in an ideal world, you end up with Sean Murphy, but we saw the price that Atlanta paid for him, that 3-team trade, a rare 3-team trade involving Milwaukee. I mean, that was a pretty good haul for Oakland, right? And the Twins have somewhat depleted, not fully. There's still prospects they can move, but you look at some of the moves they've made the last year, whether for Gray, for Malley, for Kyle Farmer, for Michael Fulmer, right? I mean, you go up and down the list of some of these trades they've made. They have moved some of their pretty good prospects. So you don't want to keep just pulling from that pool of prospects, moving those guys. And you would have had to move multiple good ones, too, for Sean Murphy. So Christian Vasquez was really their number one target, more so than Omar Narvaez and Tucker Barnhart and some others. And so they got their number one guy, a catcher.
Decent, but not great bat. Good framer, good arm, correct? And I take it he must have a pretty good reputation as far as his work with pitching staffs. I don't know that.
Yeah.
If that's accurate. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, you compare him to Jeffers. I mean, it looks like a step up, throwing out base runners. And with the new throw over rules, we'll see how that impacts the game.
Bigger bases, too.
Yeah. I mean, all that stuff, right? So, I mean, you want to make sure you got a catcher that can gun some people down at second base. And so, certainly Vasquez can do that at a higher clip than Jeffers. At least the history suggests he can. And yeah, I mean, from a pitch framing standpoint, there's a lot of subjectivity in that, but yeah, he's considered an above average, maybe not a super, super great pitch framer, but, above average, right? So yeah, and, the bat, decent, right? Nothing spectacular, but decent. But yeah, his ability to work with pitchers, good presence in the clubhouse, all that good stuff. The character makeup is certainly a thumbs up.
Carlos Correa. What is the weekly Carlos Correa update as far as the Twins go?
Twins are still very, very much in it and remain open-minded to all sorts of different possibilities. Doesn't need to be a 10-year deal, but if it has to be a 10-year deal, they would do a 10-year deal. But if it's 6 or 8, they are willing to pay him a lot of money. Now, I've been saying for weeks, do I think in the end the Twins make him the richest money offer? No, I haven't thought that at all this entire offseason. At this point, it looks like the San Francisco Giants will be that team that makes him the richest money offer. But when you keep in mind, state income tax, right? I mean, California compared to Minnesota, that's a blowout, right? So, I mean, there's certain things you could look at where, okay, maybe the number that we would report, okay, the Giants would be a larger number, but, if you're his tax guy, there could be benefits to signing here in Minnesota compared to a team in California. But bottom line is the Twins are still very, 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 very much in the Carlos Correa mix. It is worth noting, maybe you noted this on one of your other programs earlier today, but Carlos Baerga, former big leaguer from the same country as Carlos Correa, Puerto Rico, he is fancying himself as a little bit of an insider, right? Maybe he doesn't term himself that, but he keeps putting out all these notes on Instagram. He hit on Justin Verlander, but he also suggested 7 to 10 days ago that Aaron Judge, very likely heading to the Giants, also suggested Carlos Correa heading to the Giants. Also this time last year had Freddie Freeman, well, maybe it was more like March after the lockout ended, had Freddie Freeman going to Toronto, not the LA Dodgers. So Carlos Baerga's been a little bit all over the place, but he certainly has a bit of a track record for hitting on things. Well, last night, Monday night on his Instagram, said, hey, look for in the next few days, Carlos Correa re-signing with the Minnesota Twins.
Interesting stuff. All right, Dukes, thanks much, and we will talk to you on Reckless Speculation Thursday.
You got a couple other things. I sat down with Bud Grant in his office last week for an hour. We have a pregame show on Channel 5 in the Twin Cities viewing area. So we have the Vikings-Colts game on Saturday. Contractually, we have to pick up the NFL Network pregame show at 11:30. In an ideal world, we do a pregame show right up until kickoff. But we are doing a 30-minute pregame show, 11 to 11:30, kickoff at noon. So within that 30-minute pregame, it'll feature my sit-down with the 95-year-old Bud Grant. Also, I caught up with the two new Gopher football players, both transferred from Western Michigan, a wide receiver, Corey Crooms. He'll play a lot. Both these guys only have one more year of eligibility, so both these guys are going to play a lot in 2023. Crooms specializes in the slot. So if you think about Gopher football 2022, they really didn't have a receiver that could excel from the slot. So they now have that guy. What's interesting is he told me that Iowa and Wisconsin were also in his mix. So the Gophers beat out a couple Big Ten rivals for the wide receiver. Then this linebacker, Ryan Seelig, he told me that Indiana and Purdue and some other schools, but I'm just noting the Big Ten schools, Indiana and Purdue were also in on him. He's a Mike linebacker. So you think I'm a Mariano Sori-Marin, he's done as a Gopher. So, Ryan's going to have to compete. He's not promised anything, but Ryan Seelig, this linebacker transfer from Western Michigan, certainly has a shot to be the Gophers' starting middle linebacker next September.
Great stuff, Dukes. Talk to you Thursday.
Okay, see you, boys.